Hey, this is homework help for Honors Math 3, Unit 4, Worksheet 1. So I'm going to start with question number 11. So for question number 11, they want us to write the ratio of G to F in terms of N, which they already are. So G is going to go in the numerator and F in the denominator. And so the first thing I want to do is I want to factor. So I know that in the numerator I can divide out a 2 and an n. So 2n is my GCF. So I will be left with 1 minus 4n, and then all divided by 4n. And so then from here I can reduce this right here. So n divided by n is 1, so I can just cancel that. And then 2 over 4 reduces to 1 over 2. So then I would just have 1 times that, so I don't need to keep it grouped, and then all over 2. Okay, and then I can't reduce this at all, right, because we're only reducing factors, not terms, right? So this is a term because it's adding or subtracting. Okay, so for question number 13, so I have f of x, so here's my f of x. And then in my denominator, I want to take the g of x and raise it to the third power. So here's my g of x, and then raise to the third power. So in the numerator, I want to factor out that negative, so my coefficient, or excuse me, so my x term is positive. So I'm going to factor out a negative, which will make that negative 9 positive x squared. So then I'm just going to put it in the right order. So positive x squared, negative 9. And then I still have x minus 3 cubed. And then I want to factor the numerator a little further, so that's just a difference of 2 squares. So that will give me negative, and then x plus 3, x minus 3, and then over x minus 3 cubed. So here, there's one factor common, so I'm going to divide 1 out of the numerator and the denominator, and when I do that, instead of being to a power of 3, it'll be to a power of 2. So then my numerator, I have negative, and then x plus 3, and then that reduced down to just the squared. Okay, and then let's take a look at question number 17. So the numerator is a cubic, right? So cubic factoring, because the power of 3, no GCF. So that means I'm going to have a binomial and then a trinomial. And so I want to find the roots of both of those. So I know for 8x cubed, that first root would be 2x, because if I multiply 2x by itself 3 times, I would get 8x cubed. And then my second root would be negative 5. So, and the reason for that is then if I multiply negative 5 by itself 3 times, I get negative 125. So in the binomial, my roots go in there, so 2x minus 5. And then I want to square the first root, so here's my first root, so 2x times 2x. And then I want to multiply the two roots together, so 2x times negative 5 is negative 10x, but I always want to do opposite on that, right, just to get my middle terms to cancel. And then my last one is I want to square the second root, so negative 5 times negative 5 would be positive 25. So again, your roots go here, and then you square, multiply, square, but remember on that multiply you always want to do opposite. And then for the denominator, I have a difference of 2 squares, so that would be 2x plus 5, and then 2x minus 5. So then I have a common factor of 2x minus 5, and so then I would have 4x squared plus 10x plus 25, all divided by 2x plus 5. Okay. And then in the numerator, so I want to try to factor that again one more time. So I'm going to do that over here just because I need a little bit of room. So for 4x squared, so I'm going to try 2x and 2x. And then for 25, maybe 5 and 5. So that would give me the 4x squared, but then I would have 10x and 10x, which is 20x, and then that gives me 25, right? And so just remember that in general, right, not always, but in general, your cubic trinomial won't factor again, but sometimes you can, but in general you won't, okay? All right, and then let's take a look at the second page, or the back side. Okay, and let's take a look at 25. So for 25, so I have a fraction divided by a fraction. So remember, that's just the same thing as, and then I'm going to factor as I go though, so hopefully that's not too confusing. So I'm just going to try to factor my numerator here first. So that would be, let's see, 10 and 1, and I want my 10 negative. So negative 10 times 1 would give me the negative 10, and then I would have negative 10x plus 1x. And then for the denominator, so I'm going to go ahead and factor that. So that would be 2 and 3, so 2 times 3, and I want a positive middle term, so that means I want my 3 positive. And then check it real quick, so x squared and negative 6, and then 3x minus 2x is 1x. And so then I'm going to be dividing, right, dividing by the denominators. All right, so this right here, so this is my top. There's my top. And then this means to divide, and so now I want to divide by this. So divided by that. And so I'm going to factor that. So again, a difference of squares kind of squished in there. And another difference of squares. So again, so this is the fraction on top, and then divided by the denominator, so divided by the denominator. So whenever we're dividing, we multiply by the reciprocal, so that means my first fraction is going to stay exactly the same. I don't want to change that at all, so I'm just going to recopy it. And then instead of dividing, we're going to multiply by the reciprocal, so I'll take the reciprocal of that. And then I want to treat this as if it were one fraction, so I'm just going to kind of extend that, right? And so then I can cancel any numerator with any denominator. So I see x plus 1 will cancel, and so will x minus 2, and I think that's it, yeah. So then in the numerator I have left x minus 10 and x plus 2. And then in the denominator I have an x plus 3 factor, and an x minus 1 factor. And if I look again, so I don't have any common factors, and so then I'm going to leave it just like that. Okay? All right, and then one more here. So let's take a look at number 29. So this is a multiply, so all I want to do here is I want to just factor, right? So for this first one right here, so I can do GCF, so I can take an x out of both. So when I divide by x, I'll get x minus 1. Then remember, I can always check, right? So x squared minus 1x. So that's right. And then for the denominator, I know for a 2x squared, it needs to be 2x and x. And then the only way to get a 7 when I multiply is 7 times 1. So I need to decide, does the 7 go here or here? And so I'm going to put it here because I know that will give me 14x, which gets me close to that. And I want 7 to be positive, 1 to be negative. So again, like I'm just guessing and I'm checking while I go. So I have 2x squared, and then this will give me 14x minus 1x. So 14x minus 1x, and then negative 1 times 7. And then multiply, so I'm going to do the same thing on this fraction, so I'm going to factor that out. So I know the only way to get 2x squared is 2x times x, and then the only way to get 3 is 1 times 3. So, and again, I'm trying to get a 5 for my middle term. So I'm going to try doing this first. So that will give me 6x and then 1x. And I need one of them to be negative to multiply to negative 3. But I want 5 positive, so I'm going to go here and try that. So that'll be 2x squared, and then 6x minus 1x, which is 5x, and then that gives me negative 3. Okay, and then let's do the denominator. So for x squared, I would just do x times x, and then for that 3, I need to do 1 times 3. So 1 times 3, And I need a positive 2x, so that would be, my 3 needs to be positive, right? My bigger number positive. So 3x minus 1x will give me my 2x. And then again, treat it like one fraction now, because we're multiplying. And then any numerator with any denominator can reduce. So x minus 1 divided by x minus 1, and my x plus 3's, and 2x minus 1 will reduce, and I think that's it, right? So in the top, the only thing I've left is the x, and in the denominator, I only have the x plus 7. And again, I can't cancel terms, I can only cancel factors, and x is not a factor of the denominator. X plus 7 is a factor. So that will be that. Okay, and that's it for the homework help.